This is Jeff Cronenweth, and you're listening to the Cinematography Podcast.
This is Cinepod, the Cinematography Podcast, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. I'm your host, Ilya Friedman. Today on our show, my co-host Ben Rock interviews Jeff Cronenweth, ASC, the two-time Oscar-nominated DP behind such movies as Fight Club and The Social Network. His latest film, in theaters now, is TRON, ARES.
As sophisticated as the visual effects have come and the tools that we have now in the toolbox, we tried to do as much of it in camera as we could. For like the light cycles, we had complete bikes made that had all the interactive light built into them.
In this episode, you'll learn all about the visual language of TRON ARES and how Jeff created the three distinct realities in the movie. The technical gear Jeff used, including the Red V-Raptor XL 8K, shot in an IMAX format with ARRI DNA LF lenses. You also learn about the lighting, extensive use of practical interactive lighting including LEDs built into the light cycles, and the costumes. And also the connection to the original TRON movie. Jeff directly references the original 1982 TRON to make the world feel more primitive and grainy. After the interview, stick around for our short ends, our pet obsession of the week. But first, find out what's grabbing our attention in the world of entertainment in close focus.
Hey Ilya, how's it going?
Hey Ben, it's going well. It's time for another fine episode of the Cinematography Podcast. Who is on our show today?
I can't believe our luck that we've gotten to talk to this guy three times. Jeff Cronenweth, the DP of TRON ARES. Son of Jordan Cronenweth, DP of Blade Runner. I really enjoyed the movie, but it's also worth it for 9 Inch Nails. Holy crap.
I heard in some ways it's sort of like 90-minute long 9 Inch Nails music video or something. I think I've heard it described
It's
this way.
a lot of 9 Inch Nails music, a brand new 9 Inch Nails music. If you're a 9 Inch Nails fan, and I don't know that I would consider myself a fanatic, but I definitely like 9 Inch Nails. It was pretty amazing to hear it. And it's not just soundtrack by Trent Reznor, a thing that we're used to seeing now. It's 9 Inch Nails.
Interesting. So, Ben, you and I, right before we hit record on this episode, we're talking about the psychology of people and how they go about picking out camera equipment. And of course, owning a camera shop, I have a couple of thoughts about this. For our close focus today, do you want to just dive right in? Is that something we should do?
And now, close focus.
Let's talk about it, because I think it's something that probably virtually everybody listening to this has at some point in their life stumbled across a YouTube video where someone was explaining the 2025 mirrorless DSLR buyer's guide or whatever.
Yeah, it's really amazing to me because it's almost an awkward situation for me because I see people doing this on YouTube, on Facebook, on Reddit. There's people who are, I'm just going to say, quite literally talking out of their ass about like what is the best camera or what is the best camera because someone says, I want to make a podcast or I want to make a music video. And ultimately, there's just such incredible bias and incredible confirmation bias. There's people out there who are just
also
looking
conflict of interest. I just want to say, I don't want to name names, but we could all name some people who are, let's call them camera influencers, who
they receive money because
that's all they do too. Like they're not like filmmakers. They're going around talking to manufacturers, getting paid to plug their cameras.
And there's sort of like a little bit of an issue here, though, too, because the word filmmaker has been so diluted that all these people are, quote unquote, filmmakers, because filmmaker has become this nebulous term to mean someone who shoots a wedding or someone who shoots an event or someone who shoots a drone. All of these things, these people are calling themselves filmmakers.
I'll still take it over content creator every day.
But look, I don't think there's shame in actually just saying what the job title is and doing the job for that job title. There's nothing intrinsically bad about being a wedding videographer, but it has become to be associated with negative things. So there's a whole movement of people say, I'm a wedding filmmaker, I'm a wedding cinematographer. And frankly, I think that the fault lies on both the aspirational side, because these people really, they're aspiring to say what I do is cinematic. They're aspiring to say what I do is on the same level as the professionals of the industry. I've put time and effort into this.
There was a point, and I remember kind of when it was 5D Mark II era, where suddenly you'd see a wedding video that looked like the trailer to a giant Hollywood movie with all the soft focus and blown out highlights, but like it was suddenly beautiful as compared to 5 years earlier when someone was shooting it on mini DV or HDV tapes.
It didn't take away the skill to make something beautiful. I mean, look, the skill always existed. What it did is it made the tools more affordable so that people could get some of the same stuff. But the job itself hasn't really changed. The job is still that they were there to capture an event. They were there to capture two people getting married, and it's not going to show in a theater later. People are not, a paying audience is not going to go forward. So if you're not doing that, then saying filmmaker on there is really just using that term to describe the process of it, but not actually the end result. I would love if there was more gradations for the words that are spoken, and then the qualifications and the, I want to say, technical knowledge of the person who is then making a recommendation is appropriate to what it is that they're doing. They're talking about their own experience. They're talking about a thing. They're not talking about having global knowledge of an entire market. So when I see someone on Reddit saying, "What's the best camera for me to buy in November of 2025?" On one hand, they don't actually know what it is that they're asking, and they really do need to talk to someone who understands what it is, which means they need more information. You need more information, like what is that camera trying to do? What are you trying to get from that camera? What other technology might you own already so this all integrates together?
Yeah.
If you don't have this context, these questions, you might as well be asking ChatGPT or Google. It's not going to give you reality. The only way to really actually get this information is to talk to someone who is a genuine expert. And so I know most people think that those people can't be found out there. That I know most people think that like, oh, this person doesn't exist, so I have to throw it out to the AIs and the interwebs and everything else, because you can't go to like, who I think most people typically think of for a place that you would buy equipment, like an Amazon or a giant big box superstore. Yes, those people out there, they don't employ actual professionals. They employ salespeople who are trying to drive people towards high margin products or products that they have in stock or things that are convenient for them to push onto someone else. There are experts out there. I employ several of them. I myself am one. And one of the things that I used to get all the time, in a different version of the internet, were people who would find me and they would send me this question. They'd say, "Hey, what should I be doing?" And anyone who just gives an answer, you should not believe. You should not, when someone asks such a broad question of like, what camera should I get in 2025? Any answer that someone gives is the wrong answer, because they don't know the context of what you really need from that. And so anyone who's listening to the sound of my voice,
you give them a really thoughtful answer about their DSLR mirrorless options, and they're like, "But I do colonoscopies." You're like,
Or I'm looking for a webcam, or I'm looking to
I like
do
how you
something
just went right past my colonoscopy joke.
Yes, I know. I'm glad that you made it. I'm glad that you brought up the colonoscopy, but really, I guess, really.
Well, but yeah, I mean, like, do you need slow motion? Do you, like, if you're doing weddings, you probably are going to want slow motion.
You might want a little
high ISO.
Cutting the cake in slow motion.
Do you want full frame? Are you making a documentary and you need to keep everything in focus? Would Micro Four Thirds be a better choice?
There is so many parameters. There's so many things. I really hope that if anyone's listening to this podcast and they have that question of like, what should I be buying in 2025? They don't just put it into the interwebs to get all of these random peanut gallery comments back to them. They actually hit me up. They hit up my team and they say, "Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is how much money I've got to spend. I'm trying to pare this down." There are people who aren't on commission out there. The people at the big box stores and the Amazons, they're not necessarily, Amazon's not on commission, but the big box stores 100% are. Yeah. They just can't offer you any real depth or any real information. They can give you the description that's on the website, the description that's on the box. But if you actually are concerned about spending your dollars, because this is complex and this stuff can be expensive, you really need to talk to someone who is actually a true expert in this. And so, I'll turn my rant off. I'll get off my soapbox. But really, it's like, I just want, my customers, I just want the people out there to be smarter about how they get their information. And if you get your information correctly, even if you don't buy a damn thing from me, I would like to give people accurate information so at least they know where they're spending their money and what might be a good thing. Some people probably should be spending a little bit more up front. Other people might just need a cheap used thing just to get them through. But I will tell you that almost universally that someone who is serious about doing something that involves visual arts, involves video, involves filmmaking, involves weddings, the thing they probably should not be using is a phone. And I know that everyone out there really wants to just say, like, I got this great phone so I can do this. But there's so many ways that the phone can bite you, and you don't find out until it's too late. So
I got to tell you, though, like even as you say this, I was once hired to do camera by our friend Liam Finn on a golf thing. And
he gave you a phone?
In Vegas. No. I brought my camera, and I was filming stuff on my camera, but my camera didn't do slow motion. And for a couple of the shots that ended up being like signature shots, I had an iPhone that could do 240 frames per second. And I was like, we got it this other way. I got like this beautiful shot of like a guy silhouetted against the sun hitting the ball in slow motion. And that ended up being like one of the big signature moments. So I'm not saying make your phone the main thing, but like, remember you got it. And every once in a while, it might be the perfect thing.
You know what? That's a perfect use of a phone. That's perfect. It's like, oh, I've got this feature and I don't have any other way to do it, and it's on me. Why don't I get it? But probably using that phone to capture everything you did that day or for that job, I'm guessing would not have been the most appropriate choice.
And if it would be the most appropriate choice, they're not going to hire a filmmaker. They're going to hire some, minimum wage person who can run around with a phone and grab stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. So Ben, why don't we get to the interview?
All right, here's Jeff Cronenweth.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
So thank you so much for coming back on the show. I saw a screening of TRON ARES at the Burbank Dolby Theater. I don't know. It was like it's probably like 3 weeks ago, and sounded amazing. It was really great. But our composer, the guy who does all the music for our podcast, Kay Zalatrashi, went and saw it last night. He's a giant Nine Inch Nails fan, a giant TRON fan, and he loved it. I thought it was an amazing amount of fun, and a really cool movie. When you approach something like this, how much do you look at, because I feel like we've had two iterations of TRON before this that both kind of dealt with computers in our life at that moment, and I feel like this deals with almost the Internet of Things, like computers coming out, or computery things coming out of the computer into the real world. How much do you look at the other TRON movies for how they interpreted that? How much of your process is kind of like building the look based on what was done before? Or, I mean, this movie kind of has a free license to reinvent it, but what's the balance of that for you?
And that's a great question. First off, like I went back and revisited the original TRON. It had been quite a long time since I had seen it, as everybody. Yeah. And the things that, when you look at it, it obviously dates itself, but it was the most progressive film at the time. Mm-hmm. My father shot Blade Runner, and it came out, the original Blade Runner, and it came out at the same year that TRON did. And when you think of Blade Runner, you think about how sophisticated it is. When you think about TRON, people will pick on it, but you have to appreciate that was the first computer graphics integration between computer worlds and filmmaking. And they didn't even have a language to talk to each other. You have a bunch of programmers sitting around and going, you want the ball to turn which way? Why does it do that?
Yeah.
And they had to create their own language, and stumbled across it. And one frame took 10 minutes to render on a computer that's as big as 6 refrigerators, right? Yeah. So what they did and the world that they created for us, I remember being stunned when I watched that movie and then played the games like everybody else did. It was so engaging.
Same here.
And so revolutionary, right? So you start there and you appreciate what they did and what they worked around to get that experience. And then obviously Legacy, for me, there's a lot more connections to Legacy. I mean, one, it's the next evolution. They created they had the ability to create more visual worlds and get more into the grid. It was more complicated and sophisticated than what had been done originally. But also the filmmakers, I'm a good friend, Joe Kosinski, Claudio Miranda, who photographed that, was my gaffer on Fight Club.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. And so
you've probably told me that before. That's crazy.
So we're
He's
all
so
good
good.
friends,
Yeah, yeah.
and we've all worked together off and on in different capacities and stuff. And so I remember when Legacy came out, and I remember how impressive it was for what they were trying to say. They were predominantly in the grid, in a digital world, and things were quite pristine. And the new technologies, I mean, they shot it 3D, with the whole 3D rigs, and that certainly complicates things. And you can watch camera movement, and you can watch like choices that were made, again, because of what the technical limitations were at the time, right?
Hmm.
But there was such a nice look to that. It was really, really pretty, but clean. What our version, the next incarnation, which was Tron Ares, we had the opportunity to really spend time outside of the grid. Not only that, in Legacy they had Flynn's world, kind of his place and his grid, which had its own tonalities, and the Dillinger grid. And so we kind of mimicked that. We kept the Dillinger grid the red. If you will, it's like cowboys and black hats and white hats. It's really easy to see who the good guys are and the bad guys are. So the
Yeah,
red
yeah.
world, Dillinger, the NCOM neutral grid, which would have been Flynn's original grid, was kind of on the cool blue side. And then we had this opportunity to do a retro look when he kind of when Ares transcends into Flynn's world trying to get this permanence code.
That was honestly that like fired all my neurons. I love that sequence. It was so cool.
It's one of my favorites. When we were first playing around with it, I was like, oh, there was a resistance in me because we had taken such amazing clean images. Not clean, actually. That I hadn't gotten into the real world and how it differed from the grids, but we added so much grain, and we literally, as best we could, matched the original film, which was shot in black and white and hand painted in a lot of the sequences to get that original effect back in 1982, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we took what we had shot with Jeff Bridges and Jared in Flynn's world, his grid, and doubled the amount of grain like that people would ever use, and desaturated and used primary colors, and it just grew on me to this. I don't know. It's some of my favorite looks in the entire film.
I mean, you nailed it. I feel like you could cut your scenes into the original Tron and not know that it wasn't, the original. It was so authentic to that look.
And so fresh, after you've been in this like clinically perfect sterile grids of Incom and Dillinger.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the one thing that I had that say Legacy didn't is I had these programs that come out into the real world. And from day one, it was always like, how will we define this world and what separates it from the grid? And a lot of things is the fallibleness of humanity and the grit that's in the real world. It's not perfect, it's not clean, it's not fair, it's not predictable.
Yeah.
And so as much as one can put those visually into something, those concepts, is what kind of the freedom that I had for the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And so we let all those, it's so much fun to have four different distinct looks that you can apply to a movie.
So how did you and the director go about kind of sculpting your approach to those looks, lighting wise, lensing wise, everything wise?
Well, I mean, the grid in itself is all machine language, so it's all pretty, predictable and perfect, and the lines are sharp, and the colors are saturated, and the some of the sets we built for the Dillinger grid had such scale, but perfectly designed in geometric ways that kind of reflected a mechanical world, if you can imagine one, or at least our version of one. And then that the same held true for the Incom grid, because it's basically the same. It's just the good guys versus the bad guys.
Is there a lensing difference between those? Are there certain kinds of lenses that you tended to land on?
No, we didn't change for the grids. We didn't change. We kept the lenses the whole time. We just changed the kind of looks and lighting sources. But no, still, we used a ARRI DNA large format glass, and I had used the DNA glass on Being the Ricardos with Aaron Sorkin directed, and just loved that. And kind of in the same way, like did a lot of lens testing and just loved the way they looked before for some of the same reasons. Like you take a perfect world, this mechanical digital world, and you want something not to be perfect in it visually, to be standout, to have imperfections, to have like little nuances. And so these lenses just seemed perfect. I mean, when we went into it, we had all intentions of shooting it anamorphically. That was one of Joachim's, desires. But once IMAX got on board, you can't shoot something anamorphic and still like match all the necessity, what the needs for IMAX. It kind of counter to that. So we had to go back to the drawing board and start retesting glass again. And the DNA LFs were adjustable. We made a custom look with a fall off left to right and some of the nuances, and just was the right way to go. And so that's the way we went. Yeah, that's how we photographed it. And then the real world was just, we had I think close to 7 weeks of nights in downtown Vancouver for all the chases and the light cycle chases, and then the end, fights when Ares confronts Athena and all that. And there's like you go with the city. It's a beautiful city, a lot of glass buildings, but depending on where you put lights, it takes up texture, and that was the real thing, was to differentiate the grids from the real world by the amount of texture that you can feel, like tangible grit and dirt and graffiti and light sources that are mixed and shadows and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. And you embrace that in the real world stuff.
Completely. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It's not like, this is not a dig at anybody. It's just like how things evolve. When we first started the picture, there was quite a long prep for me, enormously long, the longest I've ever had, due to all of this, the crossover between visual effects, production design, and photography, and sets that had to be, had to have lighting sources built into them, and light suits and light cycles and all the different, ways that we were going to capture all that. So I started very early. And some of the Disney people would come up and they'd see the renderings on the walls of what the sets were going to be and some of the previs. And they were always like, is it really going to be that dark? Is it really going to be that gritty? And, my standard answer was, we have to differentiate ourselves. We're not sure exactly what it means yet, but we can't look like Legacy. We have an opportunity to change the two worlds, and define them. And then they hired, then Nine Inch Nails went on board, Trent and Atticus. Same people would come back and go, it's going to be gritty and dark like that, right? It's going to be, and it just amused me that, like, of course, that was always the goal. But I'm glad that, everybody's on board with, with the track and the kind of Nine Inch Nails vibe that they bring, the reverb and the bass. And
I loved the Nine. I felt like I was watching like the best Nine Inch Nails video ever made. Like that, like the Nine Inch Nails music so powers the movie. I know that has nothing to do with cinematography, but I and maybe this is a hacky question, but I did kind of wonder, because you've worked with David Fincher several times, and Trent Reznor's done a bunch of his soundtracks. I don't know if there's ever any crossover, if you guys, hang out and talk, or if you're in totally different departments. But there was that, and also obviously the Jared Leto connection, because he was in Fight Club and Panic Room. Like I was wondering if there was any, like, David Fincher convention going on the making of this, or I mean, you're all professionals doing a job, but it just seemed like it was, to me, I felt cool being like, oh yeah, there's a connection here, that goes beyond this movie.
David Fincher's the Kevin Bacon for us of all the degree separation. Two great stories there. Like, yeah, of course, I had shot a few music videos back in the day that Mark Romanek directed with Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails.
Wait, you did The Perfect Drug, didn't you? I love The Perfect Drug. That's a great video. That's such a beautiful video. We talked about that before. I totally forgot. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I hadn't seen him for years, and then of course he did the score, or they did the score Trent and Atticus did Social Network, Dragon Tattoo,
Yeah.
Gone Girl. And then my brother and I directed a Batman Arkham commercial. And I went and called Trent and asked if he'd do the score for that commercial, and he did. And then so when they came to visit the set on TRON ARES, first person they walked up to was a big bear hug, and it was nice.
Oh,
But
that's so
we
great.
don't hang out. But it was fun to have
No, but
this
your visuals and his sound go together like peas and carrots. You guys are great.
mutual respect. It was
Yeah.
very cool. The other story, yeah, Jared, Jared, we met on Fight Club. And over the years, at least 5 times, we were talking about doing one of his videos for his band, right? And they were always these phenomenal, gigantic ideas, like helicoptering to Iceland and being dropped by helicopter and backpacking in and shooting just like 6 of us for 5 days on in some glacier or something like that. And in the end, they never kind of panned out, right?
Yeah.
But we'd always been in contact. And then so he's the one that reached out actually, he was working on Ares for about 10 years, is my understanding. They
Oh,
started
wow.
developing. He was actually going to play Dillinger's character at the beginning. He and Sean Bailey kind of were navigating the beginning, efforts of this. And he changed to Ares, and developed that character and reached out to me and asked if he's one of the producers and asked if I'd be interested in shooting it. And I have over the years had a lot of chances to do some of the sci-fi pictures that have come and gone, a lot of the Marvel pictures. And to me, one, it's out of my comfort zone because I like telling like human stories, but there's nothing wrong with getting out of your comfort zone. In fact, everybody should. But I wanted it to have some resonance, some humanity to it. And I told him, like I said during the conversation, if it had just a little bit of the end sequence in Blade Runner, where Harrison Ford and Rutger Hauer are sitting on the rooftop and Rutger's about to time out basically, and talks about the value of life and how humans don't appreciate, what somebody what we have. And Jared started reciting that scene, both characters, verbatim, all
Eh,
5 minutes of it.
I could probably do that too, but yeah. I
Well, better
love
than
that
me.
movie.
I can't. I've seen it so many times, and it's in my family, and I can't do it. But nonetheless, I was like, okay, I'm in then. If we can do that, I'm not sure we did that, to that extent, but we certainly made like a fun ride, which
Hmm.
was which was the intent all along, anyways. And so yeah, and then after that conversation, I met Joachim, and we hit it off, and from there we went.
So I had like one of the things that just kept popping into my head while I was watching the movie was how many light emitting digital things there are in the movie, and probably the biggest flashiest one are the light cycles, which I think look as good as they ever have looked in any of the movies, and especially now that we're bringing them into the real world. And I was wondering, like, how much of the light we're seeing off of them that is playing on objects in the physical world, how much of that is a visual effect, how much of that was something you had to figure out and rig, how did that work? Because it looked utterly convincing, and I know visual effects are at a place now where doing that convincingly is possible, but it's always better when there's a practical element of it, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion.
As sophisticated as the visual effects have come, and the tools that we have now in the toolbox, we tried to do as much of it in camera as we could. There's so many, and that's driven by the visual effects department. They want as much in the camera as you can get, reflections and glass buildings and all the things that go with it. Just complicates their palette if we don't like contribute equally. And so for like the light cycles, we had complete bikes made that had all the interactive light built into them. I can't remember how many channels, but they were quite intense. The amount of sources that were, LEDs that were lined into the bikes, and they sat on trailers. They couldn't drive themselves. They were
Yeah.
towed like 2 inches off the ground, so it looked like they were running. Those proved to be the best because the actors got interactive light on them. You got all the reflections in cars and buildings and people standing around that they would go by, felt all the interactive light. when we had to do more, and that worked for some tracking shots, it worked for mount shots, it was best for performance as well. Then we had proxy bikes that were real motorcycles, like where their chassis were extended to be more in the fit the scale of the light cycles, and I mounted the same kind of lights all over those, but those would be ridden by stunt riders, and those could interact and go inside of cars and outside of cars, and you got all the same light sources and reflections. You just didn't, you couldn't get close on someone's face. It was behind
Yeah.
or small in frame. And then we did, process stuff on stage against blue screens, and we had light cycles on like skateboard wheels, if you will, that you could kind of bounce into each other. You would puppeteer them and match them and spin them around so you could get some of those intimate kind of collisions or near misses that you had. And then when you're super, super wide, some of it was CG.
Yeah, I mean, I figured that some of it had to be, but like the ribbon of light that they emit when they're going down like a city street is very convincing. And I was wondering if there was like some kind of a light. There's no way you could have a light gag in moving traffic like that. But I was wondering how that was simulated.
We did often though. We had a couple bites rigged for those beams, kind of to put out something that visual effects could then grab onto and extend or make grander than what we were able to achieve. But they tracked everything. There's so many cool shots that later on, like we find out how they cannibalized some of the in-camera footage and matched it. Like there's a shot where they're all in the income office. So the giant recognizer comes by the window, and I had that was an entire what they call LED pop out. It wasn't a volume, but it was a flat wall that wrapped around that floor. It was all glass high rise that we were shooting, our set that we had built. And I just took a red beam and skirted it, like tracked it around like like a sporting event would, and they tracked it and used that, and it lights the whole room. And so that's where like the technologies cross over, and we both help each other out.
Yeah, because I think we see a lot these days of like more CGI driven movies or computer animated movies, whatever, that use that bring in people from the film world to do stuff like this. But this is like primarily a live action movie that has heavy VFX baked into the concept of it. So like, and you said that your prep time was a lot longer than it usually is. How did you, like, what was the language that you used to speak with the VFX, the heads of VFX and the production design? And it almost seems to me like, and maybe I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, but it's almost like the production design and VFX kind of merge with you. Like you're sort of the node between those two, and you all have to be able to talk to each other to make a movie of this incredible complexity. Like, how did you create that language with those guys, and like what did that consist of?
You're absolutely right, but and at different times for different scenes, different departments led it. Like we all knew what we wanted to do. We all knew what the goals were and what the scenes were going to be about. But oftentimes, I'm shooting something way before visual effects has their fingers on it, and so whatever choices I make with interactive light, or how it wraps somebody, or how it interacts in a set, is now going to drive them to chase that with visual effects, or with digital worlds, or with reflections that don't exist because the set's not there.
Yeah.
So it's really like, it was a wonderful experience because we really crossed over, like you said. Like it took all three, visual effects, production design, and me, to be in harmony all the time. Some of it was like not. It's funny, when we were doing the timing, there's things that I hadn't seen for a year, waiting to see how it would come to fruition, when the effects were laid in, because when we shot it, it was a giant empty blue screen warehouse, and you're trying to imagine how that scene plays out, and where the light what motivates the light, but also dramatically, like how does that affect the scene, and where what happens to those sources and how does it evolve during the action. And so there was a lot of trust and a lot of discussions, and not as much previs as you would think. There was some,
Really?
some of the complicated scenes, some of the fights, especially with the light ribbons being attached to weapons. You had to choreograph things where you didn't like block somebody in from being able to protect themselves because they're wrapped in their own ribbon of light.
Well, it never occurred to me, but probably I should add stunts into that list of departments because like if you're shooting an action movie, if you're shooting Fight Club, you can talk to the stunt coordinator. I'm sure I'm oversimplifying it, but like on something like this, visual effects are going to have something to say about the choreography of a fight in a way that they probably don't usually.
No, and what I think, I mean, I take some pride in the way that we went about it, and you have to define rules and logic in these worlds if you want to take people down that path. If you're doing some sci-fi and there's no rules and people appear and disappear without any kind of structure, then it's hard to follow the story, right?
Yeah.
But so for us, these at the beginning, the light beams were going to stay, light ribbons were going to stay, but then that became like an impossibility because it hindered interaction with other vehicles or other cycles or fighting. Once someone's got three light ribbons around them, how can you get to them? Or how do
Yeah.
you, I mean, how can it trap Greta Lee in a circle, but then someone else can fight through it? So you structure the rules of your world, your environment, and then go from there. And so when the light cycles had maybe a 15 or 10-second decay on them, whereas the kind of hand-to-hand stuff was maybe 3 or 4 seconds, so that allowed you to keep engaging in combat without isolating yourself, if you will.
No, that's cool. So talk to me about like kind of building the sequences, maybe the sequences that you had to previs, your discussions with the director. How did you go about, this is maybe too big of a question, but I'm curious about your process with him conceptualizing, conceptualizing these sequences from the ground up. There's some outrageously complicated stuff. Like, I mean, even like at the end, there's that shot that was in the trailer when the recognizer, when like those light beams start shooting out of it. But every sequence feels like a epic. I guess that's the thing. Like, how did you guys break down kind of these epic scenes that to me don't feel. They feel like in the world of Tron, but they're fresh. They don't feel like something you would have seen in the first or second Tron, because they're in the real world. But like there's not a comp. There's not oh yeah, look at the Matrix and you'll see blah blah blah. There isn't something that's like so one to what you guys were doing.
Well, I give Joachim a lot of credit because he had a vision and he storyboarded most every scene, even though there was fewer previses. There was predominantly storyboards for most sequences, and that allowed everybody to wrap their heads around about what their contributions were going to be or where things were coming from. Because like we talked about earlier, there's so many different elements to each one of those shots and contributions from different departments. Wardrobe with the light suits and the helmets, which crossed over into props, and the sabers and the disc, which was props, and all integrated into my lighting and dimmer boards. And each suit had like 120 channels on it because they would come out and they'd be different densities, or we'd be daytime or nighttime or in a building or out of a building. And there was just an enormous amount of stuff to get through to arrive at the final the final like suits, the final light cycle, the final things, and then it evolved as we figured out what we could and couldn't get away with. How hard were they to track? How fast could we go? What were the limitations on making street corners? And then sometimes it comes down to locations and economies of like, is it more productive to do this and have this scene and recreate the same kind of impact, but in a newly conceived like scenario. For example, like when they crash, when Jared and Greta Lee are both doing a light cycle chase, and they crash and then run out onto the pier. that crash was we couldn't find a location that fit the schedule that had all the elements that we wanted to have that kind of get them off their bikes and get it into a foot chase, right?
Mhm.
And and through this process of elimination and looking and the story evolving, we found this pier and we found the concept of like these bales of recycled paper that they crash through that causes them to come off the bikes, and then the foot chase happens. And so it's an evolution of hopefully good choices that get you there, but but everybody's involved. Like how does this location affect each department? Does it fit in the schedule? Where can we make it, economically work out? Like, and so all those things are always in play all the time. And that steers you into, whoever makes the best compromise and the best choice at that time kind of wins.
So, what steered your choice of which camera system to use on the film?
Well, ever since David Fincher and I did Social Network, I've done most projects on Red. I just had a great relationship with them. I love the way that their sensors kind of process color, and so when we started Tron, all the way back to Social Network and the Red ones with the Mysterium X chips, which we were the first show to get to use. Warmth was an issue, and you always had to give more blue light to the sensor to get it to react properly. So when this came along, looking in the, reading the script, looking at some of the images, this whole Dillinger red world was kind of a question mark because red is not an easy color to replicate and can often be look soft. You can't find resolution in it. It can melt blacks out. So the challenge was to like let's see. And I honestly didn't think that the red would win, but I shot all three major cameras, and it was ridiculously hands down better, at least with that color, than anybody else. And so we went down that path. It wasn't just me, it was like Joachim and the producers and the colorist, and everybody was like, no doubt about it. This is exactly, these are what the sets look like. This is the perfect kind of color choice, and this replicates it identical. So and then that combined with, knowing that we were going to shoot IMAX and wanting to use full 8K to have the most choices for visual effects. And it guided us that way.
It was something that I've been very curious about because, you see this shot for IMAX thing, and obviously there are people like Christopher Nolan or whatever shooting on IMAX, or Ryan Coogler. But then there's this shot for IMAX. And, from a viewer's perspective, is that a framing change? Obviously it's a higher resolution, but can the red compete with the resolution of IMAX successfully yet?
It's really close, yeah. It's a format thing. I mean, like a compositional thing more than it is, because there's other systems that you can shoot for IMAX and still qualify for it. I think their requirement is to protect for IMAX 190 40% of the time, and the rest of it, you can go and you can watch the frame lines change during a show.
This movie also, especially when we're in the real world, but maybe those are just the images that imprinted on my head. There's like just a really gorgeous, sleek black level that you were able to achieve. Like it gets darkety dark where we don't want to see any color. Was that something that you did in camera? Is that more of something you achieve in the grade? And I feel like it made, when you see the light cycles or whatever, like the bright colors just popped right off of that, like anime.
I think that's something that isn't we shot or photographed principal that way with that intent, but it's not something that really manifests until you're in the DI. And then you really like look at your black levels, push the boundaries, what's legal and what's not legal, and ride that wave, And then it's interesting because you really need to have multiple kind of one look doesn't fit all formats, you know? Like P3 is different than IMAX, which is different than the 3D conversion. And so you have to go back and nuance each one of those to kind of maximize the look and keep it consistent.
Do you supervise each one of those?
Yeah, I did, and Joachim, right there, and Dave Seeger, our visual effects supervisor, always there. It was funny. It's like you talk about the technology in the movie, but there was times when I was in Santa Monica. Dave Seeger, visual effects supervisor, was in Burbank at Disney. The colorist, Stefan, was in New York, and Joachim was in London, and we were correcting in real time.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you have like four calib?
Satellite hookup. We're all in giant theaters, sitting by ourselves in the dark and talking to one another. And Stefan Sonnenfeld is brilliant colorist at Company 3, who created, helped create some of this technology that allows us all to have these kind of like be in different parts of the world.
I'm sure that it's all taken care of, but I'm just like in my mind, I'm like, how do we know we're all looking at the same calibrated image?
I often wondered that, but there's standards, and,
Yeah.
and things like in this digital world that protect you to have that they're maybe not exact, but close enough that it's almost imperceivable. And a couple times I ended up shooting something on the East Coast during the grading sessions and ended up going like, I think Joachim ended up in the Hamptons. I took a train from Philadelphia to New York and went to the Company 3 in New York. And again, we were all in different places, but you're live talking and making corrections and arm wrestling your way through the look of the film.
That's great. No, that's great to hear. That's yay for technology there. I guess like, 10 years ago, the idea that you and I would be doing this interview, seamlessly over Zoom, was hard to imagine, and just add, color calibration and, calibrated monitors or screens, projectors on every side. It just sounds like it sounds too good to work, but obviously it did. I feel like I've gotten the questions that I had kind of coming in, but like what were some of the big challenges, or like a sequence that maybe doesn't jump out at me as a viewer that was like a big win for you and your team to get it just the way that it is?
Well, I think that the light cycle chase was one of the more challenging things because it took that, and the end sequence, the big battle at the end, was about a little more than 6 weeks of nights, which are always complicated. And we're in a city that rains often, so you're always dealing with that. And we shot a lot of stuff on some of these bridges and causeways, and just keeping it consistent when you're under so many different kind of light sources that you have to embrace. When you're doing 2 mile run, we can light. We ended up lighting 4 or 5 blocks of downtown Vancouver and would do our runs there. But some of the long chases were on bridges that had some sources in them, and then we added to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those things were challenging. Things that happen that you have to accommodate for is like when ARES chases Greta all the way down to the end of the pier, and the helicopter from Dillinger comes around the corner and then spotlights her and zaps her into the grid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the helicopter shows up and the spotlight doesn't work, and you're like, okay, that's the whole light source of the scene when they're at the end of the.
So that was a real helicopter. Oh my God.
That was a real helicopter that was all in camera.
Oh, wow.
They show up on the day, and the main night sun that you would see like in a cop chase or something like that won't work. And like, okay, but you knew that this morning, and now it's 6 o'clock and getting dark, and we're going to shoot in an hour. And they ended up having like a little backup nose mount spotlight that they turned around that was, maybe a quarter of what I would hope that it would have been for the scene. And then with visual effects and me and and then faking it when you did her close-ups and stuff, we were able to like pull it off, and it looks really good. But it's just one of those things where you have to adjust to the circumstances. There was no going back for a second chance. We had a barge out in the middle of the bay with it was backlighting, putting highlights on the water. We had crane lights across in a parking area. Like it was too grand and too big to kind of let's just do it next week. You have to problem solve at the time and find out what the best solution is and try to pull it off.
And it's not on your film, by the way. Whenever I see helicopters in a scene, I always assume it's VFX just because the logistics of a helicopter sound time consuming at the very best.
Time consuming and expensive and oftentimes a risk that's not necessary anymore.
Yeah. But I mean, it looks amazing. I never would have guessed any of that stuff that you just said. I mean, it's a great sequence. I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was exactly what I wanted out of a Tron movie, and it was super fun. So congrats on everything. I think we're kind of coming up on our time here, but before we go, I just want to encourage anyone to check out Tron ARES, which I believe is still in theaters. And but also, do you have a website or Instagram or anything that you would want to plug where you interact with people?
I do not.
You don't need it.
I think there's some fan pages that I didn't create, but yeah, I like to stay close to my family, and I have enough interaction that it's never been something for me. It's just funny because Fincher and I did Social Network, and neither one of us have ever been on Facebook. And now I'm doing Aaron Sorkin's Social Reckoning.
Oh, wow.
And again, like I wouldn't know what to do on Facebook.
Well, you have like 4 more usable hours in your day than the rest of us. So, congrats to you.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show, man. Congratulations for Tron ARES, and I hope people go catch it.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
All right, so that was Jeff Cronenweth. Hey, thank you so much for being on the show. Great work on Tron ARES. I'm so looking forward to checking it out.
Definitely check out Tron ARES. I loved it.
And now, short ends.
So, Ilya, it is our patent pending segment of the show where we go into our pet obsessions of the week. Short ends, what is your obsession this week?
It's a show called The Lowdown. Have you seen The Lowdown?
I have not.
I really enjoyed it. The Lowdown is currently streaming on Hulu. It's an FX series, and it is the latest thing that Ethan Hawke has done. It is a dramatic series, and it is from some of the creators of Reservation Dogs.
Oh, cool.
And it is a lot of fun. It's serious, but not so serious. Kyle MacLachlan's in it, Gene Triplehorn. There's a lot of people who appear in this who you're like, oh, I know who that is. Oh, and they're all playing these really sort of like wonderful characters that you keep getting extra like little tidbits of stuff. And there's in fact there's wonderful like bit parts and characters too, like John Doe of the band X appears in a menacing role that is terrific. It turns out he's actually not really that menacing at all, but when he's introduced, it's incredibly menacing. And there is a fantastic score from J.D. McPherson, who I'm a fan of J.D. McPherson and did not know that he was getting involved in doing musical scores. And there's a whole lot of great needle drops of different music throughout this whole thing. And Ethan Hawke plays a character who is essentially an investigative journalist, and he also owns a bookstore, but he calls himself a truth historian, which is a combination of like truth and historian kind of like jumbled together. But he is in the best tradition of like muckraking journalists, people who are like getting super involved in the story to find out the truth. And I don't want to give too much away because I want people to discover the show and really just kind of let it unfold the way that it does. But so many great characters, so much good stuff, just enough tension and, I want to say menace and, mise en scène that you're constantly sort of like wondering what's going to happen next. And it's not like other things you've seen, but it is exactly what I needed. And it's a great show. Highly recommend checking out The Lowdown, currently streaming on Hulu and FX.
Very cool. Very cool. I got to check it out.
All right. So, Ben, what is your short end this week?
A super random YouTube channel that got served up to me. Thank you, algorithm on YouTube. But I think it's something that someone listening to this needs to go check this out. And everyone should go check it out. I think it's really cool. It's a channel called Lensivision. And there aren't even that many videos on Lensivision. It's a guy named Pavlo. And he does weird experiments with lenses and filters and tubes and stuff to create weird ass effects. So he'll like take a filter ring and he'll put a piece of metal in it with like a swirly pattern that he's hand cut out, and you'll see what the bokeh looks like. Or he'll flip a lens element and show you what he gets. Or creating deep focus kind of with a homemade split field diopter. And he's in one of them, he has like a motor that he took from a cassette tape player and uses it to spin this kind of homemade. You said you corrected me that these are not considered filters. What would you call this?
Technically, what he's doing here is creating what's known as a Waterhouse stop. A Waterhouse stop is essentially a version of an iris, and typically you think of an iris being in the middle of a lens or towards the rear of a lens. You can put an iris in the front of the lens. What happens is that you get some occlusion. The light doesn't go through, and you have to be sufficiently telephoto for this to work. The size of your occlusions need to be able to be invisible, essentially, so that you're just getting the light that's passing through the openings. So I know that you're a big fan of Lensbaby. Lensbaby out there is perhaps the most famous manufacturer of a professional product, something like this, which are sort of different shaped iris Waterhouse stops that either go in front or behind to create like different shaped bokeh. So you could create like hearts or diamonds or stars or whatever it might be.
And this guy is experimenting, and this is not all of what he's doing, but he's experimenting with a lot of different ways of creating that. And he's doing it with homemade materials like electrical tape and, cheap stuff you can buy at a hardware store.
And I got to say, though, the one that he has set up to that little motor which spins is the best one for me. That is a super cool effect. And it's like, it's not the effect that I was expecting at all, but he created a slit. And we should put a link to this specific YouTube video in our show notes over at Cam Noir, so you can go and see exactly what we're talking about. But it's very clever, and I think it's a really cool effect. And I hope that someone, does something like this.
Don't think that I'm not thinking about it for
using
any number of projects that I might have coming up.
I think it's really fun, and I'm really glad that he did this. I think that there isn't anything wrong with really calling it a filter, because I think that is the way that most people will think of this. But technically, filters
I am
are
literally today years old before I ever heard the word Waterhouse stops. Like,
sorry.
I never even encountered that.
I admire this guy. I admire Lensvision's, which is an E in there, Lensivision. But I admire his ingenuity.
He's not just doing that. He's doing all kinds of random stuff.
Yeah, I have it pulled up in another window right now, and I'm looking at some of the stuff that he's doing, and his shorts are really cool. He's got all these different things that he's doing. I don't know if everyone's going to want these effects, but there's no way to know until you experiment. There's no way to know.
But I think that there's somebody listening to our show who's like, I'm making a horror movie right now, and I want something that's going to give my image an edge and make it unusual and different. And I'm not even saying that exactly this guy's techniques are the ways to go, but he's showing like very DIY. If you have a DSLR of some kind, you can do all of what he's talking about for $50. Like there's nothing expensive here. It's all very accessible. And I think that, much like Lensbaby is a good example. Like I wouldn't make a whole film on a Lensbaby, but when you need that effect, Lensbaby is the best way to achieve it. And looking at this, it's like, there's just some really interesting stuff, but also he even has one video where he's like, I was wondering if your lens could focus sunlight enough to create a fire. And I was like, where are you going with this, friend? And his point was, if you leave like your lens uncapped, outside, could you damage your sensor just by having it being outside in the sun and focusing sunlight on your sensor? And I'm like,
The answer is yes. The answer is 100% yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Never. I mean, like I usually, put a cap on it when I'm not using it, but I would not be saying, I wouldn't be honest to say that I do it 100% of the time. And it's good to know that's a thing. But also, like a lot of his kooky experiments, he figures out how to film arc lights from a welding torch and some other stuff, and it's just really interesting in-camera effects that I feel like you could work all day long in After Effects and whatever Houdini, and you'll never recreate some of this stuff. It's just wonderful, natural, actual chaos. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I'm glad that glad you shared it with me.
Yeah. As soon as I saw it, I messaged you about it because I'm like, what the hell is this guy up to? This is really cool.
All right, Ben, I think that just about does it for this episode. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
You can find me at benrock.com. You could get in touch there. You can find me on, LinkedIn, Instagram, Blue Sky, all the normal places. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
Find me at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com. Also at Ilya Friedman, which looks like Friedman, over at Instagram. I got a couple people who reached out this past week that way. So hit me up. Ben, who do we have to thank? Who made this show possible?
It's all Alana Cody. I mean, like she's doing all the jobs now. She's producing, she's editing, and even making social videos and stuff like that. And she's kicking all the ass. We have so many interviews coming up because it's we're heading into Oscar season right now, so all those big movies are coming out. But even not including Oscar, we have great stuff like TRON ARES in this episode. We have the new Predator movie. There's a lot of cool movies coming out right about now, so we'll be pretty busy.
I'm really excited about it because this is actually probably the best time of year for movies. I mean, we get usually something good any basic season, but Oscar season probably is the.
And I don't want to promise much, but somebody who we've wanted to get on the show for a very long time. We just did an interview with this person just a few days ago. So
I'm very excited.
And it was one of most interviews I can follow pretty much everything that we're talking about. Oh, this one I'm like, wow, I'm not nearly as smart about this as I thought I was, which is always a good feeling. It's like, wow.
I wish I could have seen the movie and been there with you because I know that I would have gotten a lot out of it, but I'll just enjoy now listening to you get mesmerized.
Movie. Deep tease. Yeah. And then also we have to thank Kays Alakrakshi, who composed all the music that you're hearing. Check him out at musicbykays.com. Hire him to make a score for you, or go check out his YouTube page, which is Kays Labs, and you can watch him fix synthesizers.
Awesome. All right, Ben, that just about does it for us. I'm going to take us out. Thanks for tuning in.
All right.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.